Grace Mullane had always dreamed of seeing the world. Born in England in 1996, she grew up surrounded by a loving family who described her as the kind of person who could brighten even the darkest day with nothing more than her smile. Creative, compassionate, and endlessly curious, Grace had recently graduated with a degree in advertising and marketing. Before setting off on the adventure of a lifetime, she made one final act of kindness that perfectly reflected who she was. She cut off her long hair and donated it to a charity that created wigs for children battling cancer. Then, with a backpack on her shoulders and excitement in her heart, she left home for a year-long journey across the globe. South America welcomed her first, and every new city became another chapter in a story she eagerly shared with family and friends. Her messages were filled with breathtaking landscapes, funny encounters, and dreams of what still lay ahead. For Grace, the world wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. By late November of 2018, her journey had brought her to New Zealand, a country famous for its stunning scenery and reputation as one of the safest places on earth. She checked into a backpackers' hostel in central Auckland, quickly making acquaintances with fellow travelers from around the world. On the evening of December 1st, she slipped into a simple black dress, put on a pair of white shoes, and walked into the city with plans to meet someone she had connected with on Tinder. At first, she had been hesitant about the date, but after exchanging more messages, she decided to give him a chance. Throughout the evening, she reassured a close friend back home that everything seemed promising. She described her date as charming, successful, and easy to talk to. It sounded like the beginning of an ordinary evening, to strangers sharing drinks, laughter, and conversation. But hidden beneath the bright lights of Auckland was a darkness neither Grace nor anyone who loved her could possibly imagine. The pair met inside the busy Sky City entertainment complex, where restaurants, bars, and casinos buzzed with life late into the evening. Security cameras quietly documented their every movement as they laughed, shared drinks, and wandered between venues. To anyone watching, they appeared completely comfortable in each other's company. Grace even messaged a friend, saying she felt an instant connection with the man sitting across from her. But cameras inside one of the bars captured a small moment that would later disturb investigators. While Grace briefly stepped away from the table, her date reached across, picked up her handbag, and searched through its contents. It lasted only seconds, unnoticed by everyone around him. Yet it hinted at a side of his personality, hidden beneath his polite smile. As the night continued, they eventually left the bar together, walking arm in arm into the warm Auckland evening. The following day should have been filled with celebration. December 2nd marked Grace's 22nd birthday, and her family in England eagerly waited to surprise her with messages and phone calls. But something was terribly wrong. Hours passed without a single reply. Her phones rang unanswered before going straight to voicemail. Social media remained silent. Friends who had been receiving regular updates from her travels suddenly heard nothing at all. Her older brother later explained that Grace had never gone this long without contacting someone she loved, especially on such an important day. At first, everyone tried convincing themselves there had to be a simple explanation: a dead battery, poor signal, or a spontaneous trip somewhere unexpected. Yet with every passing hour, that hope slowly began to fade, replaced by a fear no family ever wants to face. As concern rapidly turned into panic, Grace's parents contacted New Zealand police and reported their daughter missing. Officers initially believed there might be an innocent explanation. Most of her belongings remained untouched inside the hostel, and travelers often changed plans without warning. But detectives couldn't ignore one crucial fact: Grace had vanished without leaving behind a single message. Investigators immediately began retracing her final known movements using Auckland's extensive CCTV network. Camera after camera pieced together the timeline of her last evening until one face appeared over and over again. The unidentified man she had spent the night with quickly became the center of the investigation. His identity was soon confirmed. His name was Jesse Kempson, a 26-year-old local who had matched with Grace online only a day before they met. The more detectives learned about Jesse, the more unsettling his background became. People who knew him painted the picture of a compulsive liar who seemed incapable of telling the truth, even when there was no reason to lie. He claimed to be successful, wealthy, and connected to famous athletes. At different times, he told employers, landlords, and girlfriends completely different stories about his life. None of them were real. His lies had cost him jobs, friendships, and homes, yet he continued inventing new identities wherever he went. On the very day he met Grace, He had reportedly lost another job after his dishonesty caught up with him once again. Behind the confident image he presented to strangers was a man whose entire life had become a carefully constructed illusion, and detectives were beginning to suspect that Grace had walked directly into it. Police invited Jesse to the station for what they described as a routine interview. Calm, cooperative, and seemingly confident, he willingly explained how he and Grace had matched on Tinder before meeting for drinks. According to his version of events, everything had gone perfectly. He insisted they enjoyed each other's company before saying goodnight with nothing more than a hug and a kiss on the cheek. He claimed they walked in separate directions around 10 o'clock and never saw each other again. When detectives asked whether he would provide a DNA sample, he immediately agreed, repeating that he had absolutely nothing to hide. His relaxed demeanor almost made the interview seem ordinary, yet experienced investigators noticed small inconsistencies in his timeline, details that simply didn't fit with the evidence they were already collecting. While Jesse sat inside the interview room repeating his carefully rehearsed story, another team of investigators was watching hours of surveillance footage from around Auckland. Nearly 6 terabytes of recordings were examined frame by frame, revealing something Jesse had completely failed to mention. Cameras captured him and Grace entering the City Life Hotel together, walking side by side before disappearing into an elevator. The footage showed them reaching Jesse's floor, but only one person was ever seen leaving alive. Grace never appeared on any camera again. That single discovery transformed the investigation instantly. The man who claimed they had parted ways on the street had just been caught in a lie, and detectives realized they were no longer searching for a missing tourist. They were hunting for the truth behind what had happened inside one hotel room. The hotel surveillance became even more disturbing as detectives followed Jesse's movements over the next 24 hours. Early the following morning, on what should have been Grace's birthday, he calmly walked through Auckland shopping for a large suitcase before purchasing cleaning supplies. Later, he rented a car, met another woman for a Tinder date, and casually discussed subjects so disturbing that she refused to get into his vehicle. As evening approached, he rented a carpet cleaning machine, explaining that he needed to remove spilled red wine. Hours later, cameras recorded him loading 2 heavy suitcases onto a hotel trolley before placing them into the rental car. The following morning, he bought a shovel, thoroughly washed the vehicle, and returned it as though nothing unusual had happened. Every action appeared deliberate, organized, and frighteningly calculated. By now, investigators knew Jesse's story had completely fallen apart. On December 5th, officers arrived at the City Life Hotel intending to question him once again. Almost unbelievably, Jesse walked through the hotel's front entrance at the exact same moment. The instant he noticed the police, his body language changed. Without saying a word, he turned around and hurried in the opposite direction, desperately trying to avoid them. Officers immediately chased after him and brought him back for another interview. This time, the pressure was overwhelming. Detectives had surveillance footage, witness statements, and an ever-growing mountain of evidence closing in around him. The carefully crafted lies that had protected him for years were finally beginning to collapse. And before long, he would be forced to reveal a version of events far more horrifying than anyone had imagined. The second interview was nothing like the first. Gone was the confident man who had insisted Grace walked away safely that night. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Jesse's story suddenly changed. He claimed that after returning to his hotel room together, the evening became intimate. According to him, Grace had suggested experimenting with rough sexual activity involving choking, and he insisted that everything had been consensual. He described the encounter as an accident, saying he had fallen asleep afterward and only realized something was wrong the next morning. It was a dramatic shift from his original statement, one that detectives immediately recognized as an attempt to explain away the growing evidence. The timing of his confession, only after his lies had been exposed, raised even more questions about what had truly happened inside that hotel room. Investigators listened carefully but remained focused on the facts rather than the story. They challenged Jesse on every inconsistency, reminding him that his actions after Grace's death did not resemble those of someone experiencing panic or shock. Instead of calling emergency services, he had spent hours buying luggage, cleaning supplies, renting vehicles, and carefully planning his movements throughout the city. Eventually, under relentless questioning, Jesse admitted that he had placed Grace's body into a suitcase and driven it to a remote location outside Auckland. He agreed to guide detectives there. As police vehicles traveled into the quiet countryside, an unbearable silence filled the air. Everyone involved understood that they were no longer searching for a missing backpacker. They were preparing to bring a grieving family's worst nightmare into heartbreaking reality. Following Jesse's directions, investigators arrived at a wooded area near the Waitakere Ranges, where officers began carefully searching the roadside. Before long, they discovered freshly disturbed earth hidden just a short distance from the road. As forensic teams worked through the scene, the devastating truth emerged. The body buried beneath the soil was believed to be Grace Mullane. News spread quickly across New Zealand and beyond, replacing hope with overwhelming sorrow. For detectives who had worked around the clock praying for a different outcome, the discovery marked one of the most painful moments of the entire investigation. For Grace's family waiting anxiously in England, it confirmed the tragedy they had desperately hoped would never come. Only a day earlier, Grace's father had stood before television cameras pleading for help, asking strangers to help bring his daughter home safely. Instead, he now faced the unimaginable task of preparing to take her home in the most heartbreaking way possible. Across New Zealand, flowers, candles, and handwritten messages appeared in public squares as thousands of people mourned a young traveler, whose kindness had touched countless lives despite never meeting her. Then, in an extraordinary moment that resonated around the world, New Zealand's Prime Minister publicly addressed Grace's family. She expressed profound sorrow and apologized on behalf of the nation, saying Grace should have been safe during her visit. Those words reflected the grief of an entire country struggling to understand how such a terrible crime could happen within its borders. As forensic experts continued examining the evidence, the full horror of the crime became impossible to ignore. The autopsy concluded that Grace had died from prolonged strangulation, requiring sustained force over several minutes. Bruising found on her body was consistent with being forcibly restrained, contradicting the suggestion that her death had resulted from a brief accident. Meanwhile, forensic specialists examining Jesse's hotel room discovered blood evidence despite his extensive efforts to clean the scene. Investigators also recovered internet searches made during the early hours after Grace's death. Rather than seeking medical assistance or contacting authorities, Jesse had searched for remote locations before later attempting to conceal what had happened. Every new piece of evidence painted a picture of deliberate decisions rather than desperate panic. When the case finally reached court, Jesse pleaded not guilty to murder. His defense argued that Grace's death had been a tragic accident during consensual sexual activity and claimed his actions afterward were driven by fear. Prosecutors firmly rejected that narrative. They told jurors that the evidence demonstrated sustained violence, calculated concealment, and repeated deception from the very beginning of the investigation. They carefully reconstructed Jesse's movements using surveillance footage, forensic findings, witness testimony, and digital evidence, showing how he repeatedly chose to protect himself. Instead of seeking help for Grace, the courtroom became the place where every lie was measured against every fact, leaving the jury to determine whether this had truly been an accident or a calculated act of murder. After weeks of testimony and careful deliberation, the jury reached its decision. Jesse Kempson was found guilty of murdering Grace Mullane. The verdict brought visible relief to Grace's family, though no courtroom decision could ever erase the pain of losing someone they loved so deeply. During sentencing, the judge described Jesse as being in a position of overwhelming physical dominance and rejected every attempt to portray the killing as an unfortunate mistake. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a lengthy minimum term before becoming eligible for parole. For the legal system, the case had reached its conclusion. For Grace's loved ones, however, the sentence marked only the beginning of a lifetime without her. Grace's mother delivered an emotional victim impact statement that left the courtroom in silence. She spoke of imagining the fear her daughter must have experienced during her final moments and the unbearable guilt every parent feels when they cannot protect their child. Outside the courthouse, Grace's family thanked investigators, prosecutors, and the people of New Zealand for their compassion throughout the ordeal. They explained that while justice had been served, nothing could restore the future Grace had been excited to build. Their lives had been permanently changed by one night, one decision, and one man whose actions stole not only a young woman's life, but also the happiness of an entire family. The story did not end with the murder conviction. As additional investigations unfolded, more women came forward with disturbing accounts of Jesse's violent behavior. Separate court proceedings resulted in further convictions involving serious offenses committed against other victims, revealing a pattern of abuse that extended far beyond Grace's case. These revelations reinforced investigators' belief that Grace had tragically encountered a dangerous predator, rather than simply experiencing a chance meeting that turned fatal. The public response also sparked widespread conversations about online dating safety, violence against women, and the harmful tendency to scrutinize victims instead of focusing on those responsible for committing such crimes. Grace's case became a catalyst for important discussions that continued to this day. Although her life was cruelly cut short at just 22 years old, Grace Mullane's legacy continues through the people who refused to let her story be forgotten. Her family transformed unimaginable grief into action by supporting campaigns dedicated to preventing violence against women and helping survivors rebuild their lives around the world. Grace is remembered not for the way she died, but for the kindness she showed, the adventures she embraced, and the joy she brought to everyone fortunate enough to know her. Her story serves as a heartbreaking reminder that evil can hide behind an ordinary smile, but it is also a testament to the enduring strength of love, family, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Some journeys end far too soon, yet the impact of a beautiful life can continue inspiring compassion, awareness, and hope for generations to come.